I woke up that Tuesday morning in February to find a construction crew tearing up my backyard in Boulder, Colorado, and nobody had bothered to ask my permission. The sound of heavy machinery had pulled me from sleep around 6 in the morning. I stumbled to my bedroom window, still half asleep, and saw 3 workers in bright orange vests operating a small excavator on my property. My property. Not the community area behind the houses, not some disputed borderland, but clearly within my fence line about 20 feet from my back deck. I threw on jeans and a jacket and rushed outside into the freezing morning air. The ground was covered in patches of snow, and my breath came out in visible puffs as I jogged toward the workers. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted over the noise of the machinery. One of the workers, a middle-aged guy with a thick mustache, turned off the excavator and climbed down. "Morning. We're installing the heated parking pad. Should be done in a few days." "Heated parking pad on my land." He pulled out a crumpled work order from his pocket. "Says here this is community property, part of the Highland Meadows HOA common area. We're putting in a 20 by 40-foot heated concrete pad for winter guest parking." "This isn't community property. This is my backyard." "I'm Henry Quentin. I own this house and you're literally digging up my land." The worker looked uncertain now, glancing back at his crew. "Look, man, we just go where they tell us. The HOA contracted us. You need to talk to them. I'm talking to you and I'm telling you to stop." "Can't do that without authorization from whoever's paying us. Call the HOA." I pulled out my phone and immediately dialed the HOA management office. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I left a heated message explaining that there were workers destroying my property and demanding an immediate callback. The workers continued their job while I stood there fuming. I called again. Voicemail. I sent an email. Then I called my real estate lawyer, Marcus Hoffman, who had handled my home purchase 2 years ago. "Henry, slow down," Marcus said after I explained the situation in a rush. "Do you have your property survey?" "Yes, in my files inside." "Get it and check the boundaries. Take photos of everything. Don't physically interfere with the workers. That could get you in trouble. Document everything and we'll handle this properly." I spent the next hour taking dozens of photos and videos from every angle. I found my property survey and confirmed what I already knew. My property line extended another 60 feet past where they were digging. This was unquestionably my land. By 9 in the morning, the HOA office finally called back. The voice on the other end was crisp and dismissive. "Mr. Quentin, this is Deborah Paulson from Highland Meadows HOA Management. I understand you have concerns about the new guest parking installation." "Concerns? Your contractors are tearing up my private property without permission." "That's not a concern. That's trespassing and destruction of property. According to our records, the area in question is designated common space in the community master plan. According to my property survey and deed, it's my land. I have the documents right here." There was a pause. "I'll need to review this with our board president. Can you send me your survey?" "I'll send it, but I want those workers off my property immediately." "The project has already begun, Mr. Quentin. We can't just halt construction without proper review." "I'll get back to you within 48 hours. 48 hours? No, you'll stop this now or I'm calling the police." "That's your prerogative, but I should warn you that interfering with approved HOA improvements can result in fines and legal action against you." The audacity made my blood boil. "The legal action is going to be coming from my direction. Stop the construction." She hung up. I called the Boulder Police non-emergency line and explained the situation. An officer arrived about an hour later, a young guy named Officer Davis who looked barely old enough to be out of the academy. "So this is a property line dispute?" he asked after I explained everything. "No dispute. This is my property. I have the survey proving it." He examined my survey document and looked at where the workers were digging. "Looks pretty clear to me, but this is really a civil matter. I can't force them to stop working based on a property dispute. You need to handle this through the courts or with the HOA. They're destroying my property without permission." "I understand your frustration, sir. My suggestion is to get a lawyer and file for an emergency injunction. That's the proper legal channel. If I make them stop and it turns out they have a right to do the work, you could be liable." After Officer Davis left, I called Marcus again. He agreed to file for an emergency injunction that afternoon. The court date was set for Friday, 3 days away. In the meantime, the construction continued. By Wednesday evening, they had excavated a large rectangular area of my yard and were laying down gravel base. By Thursday, they were pouring concrete and installing the heating elements. I documented everything, seething with rage but following Marcus's advice to not physically interfere. Friday morning arrived, and I met Marcus at the Boulder County Courthouse. The HOA was represented by their attorney, a slick-looking woman named Patricia Chen, and accompanied by the HOA board president, Karen Whitmore. Karen was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, short blonde hair with carefully placed highlights, expensive athletic wear that she clearly wore for fashion rather than actual exercise, and that particular expression of smug superiority that certain suburban authority figures wear like armor. The hearing was before Judge Raymond Martinez, who looked tired before we even started. Marcus presented our case first, showing the property survey, my deed, and photographs of the construction on my clearly defined private property. "Your Honor, this is straightforward," Marcus said. "The HOA began construction on my client's private property without permission, notification, or any legal right. We're seeking an immediate halt to construction and an order requiring the HOA to restore the property to its original condition." Patricia Chen stood up with a confident smile. "Your Honor, the HOA has been operating under documentation that showed this area as common space. There was a good faith belief that the construction was appropriate." "Good faith," I muttered, and Marcus touched my arm to quiet me. Judge Martinez examined the documents. "Miss Chen, I'm looking at the property survey here. It's pretty unambiguous. Where did your client get the idea this was common space?" Karen leaned forward and whispered something to her attorney, who nodded. "Your Honor, there was an older community plan from 2008 that showed different boundaries. But the current legal survey, registered with the county, clearly shows this as private property belonging to Mr. Quentin," Marcus interjected. "The newer survey supersedes any older documents." Judge Martinez spent several minutes reviewing the paperwork, then looked up with a stern expression. "I'm granting the injunction. Construction is to stop immediately. Furthermore, the HOA is ordered to remove the installed structure and restore the property to its previous condition within 30 days. Karen's face flushed red. "Your Honor, the structure is nearly complete. The cost to remove it would be substantial." "That's not my concern, Miss Whitmore. You built it on someone else's property without permission. Mr. Quentin, you're entitled to restoration and you may pursue damages separately." We won, but as we left the courtroom, Karen blocked my path in the hallway. "This isn't over," she said coldly. "You've made an enemy of this entire community. Every violation, every tiny infraction of HOA rules will be watching." "Looking forward to it," I replied. "Maybe next time check property lines before you start digging." Her face twisted into a snarl, but Patricia pulled her away before she could respond. That afternoon, I returned home to find the construction workers gone and an ugly heated parking pad sitting in my backyard, like a concrete monument to HOA overreach. It was actually finished, complete with the heating elements installed and connected to an electrical system. I called Marcus to discuss next steps. They have 30 days to remove it, right? Correct. If they don't, we can file for contempt and you can potentially hire contractors to remove it yourself and bill the HOA. What about damages? This completely destroyed my landscaping. I had garden beds, a fire pit area, privacy shrubs. It's all gone. Document everything. Get estimates for restoration. We'll include it all in a damages claim. Over the weekend, I got quotes from 3 different landscaping companies. The estimates to restore my yard to its previous condition ranged from $15,000 to $22,000. The lowest bidder, a company called Rocky Mountain Landscaping, seemed professional and thorough. I kept all 3 quotes for my records. Monday morning, I received a certified letter from the HOA. I opened it with my phone recording, something Marcus had advised me to do with all HOA communications. The letter informed me that I was being fined $500 for unauthorized modifications to approved property aesthetics, because the concrete pad didn't match my house's approved color scheme. The irony was so thick, I actually laughed out loud. I forwarded the letter to Marcus immediately. He called me within an hour and he was not amused. They're trying to harass you into accepting the situation. Don't pay this fine. I'll respond on your behalf. Days 3 through 15 passed with increasing tension. The parking pad remained in my backyard. I received 2 more violation notices, one for allowing an unapproved structure on my property, and another claiming my trash bins were visible from the street, something that had never been an issue in the 2 years I'd lived there. I kept meticulous records of everything, photographed my trash bins in their normal location, and continued documenting the parking pad's presence on my property. On day 16, I received an email from Deborah at the HOA office. Mr. Quentin, the board has reviewed the court order and determined that removal of the parking structure would be financially irresponsible to the community. We'd like to propose a compromise where you deed that portion of your property to the HOA in exchange for a payment of $10,000 and waiver of all recent fines. I called Marcus and read him the email. They want you to sell them your land after they already destroyed it for less than the cost of restoration. He sounded incredulous. Respond that you decline and expect full compliance with the court order. I sent a brief email declining their offer. The response from Deborah came within minutes. The board is disappointed in your unwillingness to be reasonable. Please be advised that your account now shows outstanding fines totaling $1,500. Failure to pay within 30 days will result in a lien on your property. Day 20 arrived with no action from the HOA. The parking pad sat there, a daily reminder of their contempt for both the law and my property rights. I noticed that some of my neighbors had started parking there, treating it as the guest parking it was intended to be. The first time I saw an unfamiliar car on the pad, I went outside and found the owner, a woman visiting the house 3 doors down. "Excuse me, you're parked on my private property," I said as politely as I could manage. She looked confused. "This is the new guest parking." The HOA sent out an email. The HOA built it illegally on my land. There's a court order requiring them to remove it. That seems like something between you and them. I'm just parking where they told me to. I took a photo of her license plate and the car's position. Over the next week, I documented 8 different vehicles using the parking pad, all apparently directed there by HOA communications. Marcus sent a strongly worded letter to the HOA attorney, noting that they were not only failing to comply with the court order, but were actively encouraging trespassing on my property. The response was a masterpiece of legal doublespeak, essentially saying they'd get to it eventually. Day 30 arrived on a snowy Monday morning. I stood in my kitchen drinking coffee and staring at the parking pad through my window. The deadline had passed. The HOA had not even begun removal. I called Marcus. They've violated the court order. What now? Now we file for contempt. And Henry, if you want to expedite this, you have the option to hire contractors to remove it yourself and sue them for the costs. Given their behavior, I'd recommend that route. Let's do it. I called Rocky Mountain Landscaping and explained the situation to the owner, a straightforward guy named Tom Rivera. So let me get this straight, Tom said. The HOA built this on your land. A judge ordered them to remove it, and they just ignored the order. That's exactly right. Man, I've heard HOA horror stories, but that's next level. Yeah, we can remove it. Demo and disposal of the concrete, disconnecting the electrical, restoring the ground underneath. I'd estimate about $8,000 for removal and demo, then the landscaping restoration is separate, that original $15,000 quote. So $23,000 total, give or take. I'll write up a detailed proposal. I signed the contract that Wednesday. Tom's crew started work that Friday morning. I took the day off work to supervise and document everything. The crew arrived at 8 in the morning with a small excavator, a concrete saw, and a dump truck. Tom walked the site with me, taking photos and notes about the existing condition. We'll cut the concrete into sections, break them up, load them into the dump truck. The heated elements and electrical will need to be disconnected by a licensed electrician. I've got a guy coming at 10. Then we excavate out the gravel base and start soil restoration. How long will this take? Demo should be done today, maybe tomorrow morning. Then we'll need a few days for the soil work before we can start the landscaping restoration. At 9:30, Karen Whitmore came storming into my backyard with 2 other board members I didn't recognize. What do you think you're doing? She shrieked, her face already red with anger. Removing an illegal structure from my property as ordered by a judge. That's HOA property. You can't destroy it. It's my property, Karen. You had 30 days to remove it and you didn't, so I'm doing it and billing you. We'll sue you for every penny. That structure cost the HOA $40,000 to install. Tom stepped forward, holding up his clipboard. Madam, you need to leave the work site for safety reasons. I'm not going anywhere. This is HOA business. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Karen, you're trespassing on my property and interfering with legal work. Leave now or I'm calling the police. Call them. They'll arrest these workers for destruction of HOA property. I dialed the police non-emergency line. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, clearly confident she was in the right. The 2 other board members looked increasingly uncomfortable. Officer Davis arrived about 20 minutes later. He looked at me and recognition crossed his face. Property line dispute again. Same situation. I have the court order here. I showed him the order on my phone. The deadline for the HOA to comply has passed, so I hired contractors to remove the structure. Now the HOA president is trespassing and interfering with the work. He read through the court order, then turned to Karen. Madam, this seems pretty clear. Do you have any documentation showing you have a right to be on this property? I'm the HOA president. I have a right and responsibility to protect community property. This is his private property according to the court order. You need to leave. This is outrageous. The police should be protecting community interests, not helping some troublemaker destroy our improvements. Officer Davis's expression hardened. Madam, I'm not going to ask again. Leave the property now or I'll cite you for trespassing. Karen looked like she might explode, but one of the other board members, a man in his 60s, touched her arm. Karen, let's go. We need to talk to Patricia. She stormed off, pulling out her phone and already yelling at someone before she was even off my property. The demo work continued throughout the day. The concrete saw screamed as it cut through the parking pad, sectioning it into manageable pieces. The excavator broke up the sections and loaded them into the dump truck. The electrician disconnected and removed the heating elements and wiring. By 5 in the evening, the parking pad was gone, leaving behind a rectangle of disturbed soil and gravel. Tom's crew would return Monday to begin the restoration work. That evening, I received an email from Patricia Chen, the HOA's attorney. Mr. Quentin, you have destroyed HOA property valued at $40,000. We are pursuing immediate legal action for damages, vandalism, and violation of HOA covenants. You will be billed for the full cost of reconstruction. I forwarded it to Marcus with a simple message. Here we go. Marcus called me within the hour. They're delusional. We have a court order. We have documentation of their non-compliance. Let them try. Over the weekend, I received a formal lawsuit notice. The HOA was suing me for $40,000 in damages, $20,000 in punitive damages and legal fees. They claimed I had destroyed community property, violated HOA rules, and acted maliciously to harm the community. Marcus filed our countersuit on Tuesday. We sued for $23,000 for restoration costs, $1,500 for the bogus fines they'd tried to impose, and $10,000 in damages for harassment, emotional distress, and loss of use of my property. We also requested attorney fees. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal filings, depositions, and increasingly bizarre HOA violations. I was cited for my mailbox being the wrong shade of white, for having my garage door open during unapproved hours, and for creating a noise disturbance when I mowed my lawn at 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday. Tom's crew completed the restoration work beautifully. They'd brought in topsoil, re-established my garden beds, planted new privacy shrubs, rebuilt my fire pit area with natural stone, and even improved the drainage. The yard looked better than it had before. The bill came to $24,000, slightly over the estimate due to some unexpected complications with soil contamination from the concrete. I paid it and added it to our lawsuit documentation. Marcus scheduled my deposition for early April. The HOA's attorney, Patricia, conducted it in a conference room at her law office. Karen attended, glaring at me the entire time. Patricia walked through the timeline, clearly trying to catch me in some admission of wrongdoing. Mr. Quentin, when you hired contractors to destroy the parking structure, did you notify the HOA? I hired contractors to remove an illegal structure from my property after the HOA failed to comply with a court order. I wasn't required to notify them. The HOA received no warning that you intended to destroy $40,000 worth of improvements. The HOA received a court order 30 days before removal began. That was their warning. Did you consider that the parking structure might benefit the community, even if there was a property line misunderstanding? There was no misunderstanding. The HOA deliberately built on my property, ignored a court order to remove it, and then tried to extort me into selling my land. The benefit to the community doesn't give you the right to steal my property. Karen couldn't help herself. You're a selfish man who only cares about himself. That parking was needed for our elderly residents and their guests during winter months. Marcus interjected. That's not a question, and it's inappropriate commentary. Patricia tried to regain control. Mr. Quentin, did you attempt any compromise with the HOA? They offered me $10,000 for land that cost me $24,000 to restore after they destroyed it. That's not a compromise, that's an insult. The deposition continued for another hour, but it was clear they had no case. Every question Patricia asked had a simple answer. They built on my property illegally, a judge agreed. They refused to fix it, so I fixed it myself. Karen's deposition, which Marcus conducted the following week, was apparently a disaster. Marcus played me the relevant recordings later. She was combative, defensive, and at one point actually said that property rights shouldn't supersede community needs, which was basically an admission that she knowingly built on my property and didn't care. In May, both sides submitted briefs for summary judgment. Marcus was confident. Henry, their case is garbage. They have no defense for building on your property without permission. They have no defense for ignoring the court order. Their damages claim is absurd. I expect Judge Martinez to throw out their suit and rule in our favor. The hearing for summary judgment was scheduled for June 3rd. I took the morning off work and met Marcus at the courthouse. Judge Martinez did not look any less tired than he had at the emergency injunction hearing. He reviewed both briefs, asked a few questions, and rendered his decision. I've rarely seen a case this straightforward being made so complicated, he began. The HOA built a structure on Mr. Quentin's private property without permission. I ordered them to remove it. They didn't. Mr. Quentin removed it himself, which he was legally entitled to do. The HOA's lawsuit is dismissed in its entirety with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm granting Mr. Quentin's countersuit. The HOA is ordered to pay Mr. Quentin $24,000 for restoration costs, $1,500 for improper fines, and I'm awarding an additional $5,000 in damages for bad faith legal action and harassment. Mr. Quentin is also entitled to reasonable attorney fees. Patricia stood up quickly. Your Honor, the HOA will appeal this decision. That's your right, but I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office. Building on someone's property without permission, refusing court orders, and then suing the victim shows a pattern of behavior that may warrant criminal investigation for fraud and misconduct in office. Karen went pale. Your Honor, that's excessive. This was a simple property dispute. No, Miss Whitmore, this was deliberate misconduct by an HOA board. The district attorney will determine if criminal charges are warranted. We left the courthouse with a complete victory. Marcus was elated. The attorney fees are going to add another $15,000 at least. Plus, if they appeal and lose, they'll owe even more. And now they're facing potential criminal investigation. Will anything actually come from the DA referral? I asked. Depends on what the DA finds. If the HOA has a pattern of this kind of behavior, if there's evidence they knowingly built on your property despite having access to the correct surveys, it could be charges of misconduct, fraud, maybe even embezzlement if they misused HOA funds. 2 weeks later, I received a check from the HOA for $30,500, covering the judgment but not yet including attorney fees. A separate letter informed me that Karen Whitmore had resigned as HOA president and that Patricia Chen was no longer representing the HOA. The new HOA president, a retired school teacher named George Hoffman, called me personally to apologize. Mr. Quentin, I'm not asking for anything or trying to influence any ongoing matters. I just want you to know that several board members, myself included, were not fully informed about what was happening. Karen made a lot of decisions unilaterally. The board is conducting a full review of her actions, and we're committed to following proper procedures going forward. I appreciate that, George. I never wanted to be at war with the HOA. I just wanted my property respected. Completely understandable. We're implementing new oversight procedures and requiring legal review of any construction projects. This should never have happened. In July, Marcus called with an update. The DA's office had opened an investigation into the HOA's finances and Karen's conduct. Apparently, I wasn't the first homeowner she'd had conflicts with, though my case was the most egregious. They found evidence that Karen was aware your property survey was correct, Marcus told me. There are emails between her and Deborah Paulson discussing the property lines before construction started. They decided to build anyway and hope you either wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight it. So they knowingly trespassed and destroyed my property. That's what the evidence suggests. The DA is considering charges of criminal trespass, destruction of property, and misconduct in office. There's also evidence she misused HOA funds for personal expenses, which is embezzlement. The story made the local news in August. Former HOA president charged in property scheme, read the headline. Karen was charged with criminal trespass, criminal mischief for the property destruction, misconduct in office, and 3 counts of embezzlement totaling $18,000 in HOA funds used for personal expenses. Deborah Paulson was charged as an accessory for her role in knowingly proceeding with the illegal construction. The trial was scheduled for October. The prosecutor, an intense woman named Amanda Sullivan, contacted me to testify. I took the stand on the 3rd day of the trial. Amanda walked me through the entire timeline, from waking up to construction on my property to the final restoration. Karen's defense attorney, a weary-looking public defender named Robert Moss, tried to paint me as an unreasonable homeowner who refused to compromise. Mr. Quentin, when the HOA offered you $10,000 and asked you to deed the property to them, you refused. Correct, correct. Didn't you consider that compromise might have saved everyone time and money? They destroyed my property and then offered me less than half what it cost to fix. That's not a compromise. But you could have avoided all this conflict. I could have, by the HOA not building on my property in the first place. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Karen guilty on all counts. Deborah took a plea deal and received probation and community service. Karen was sentenced in November. She received 2 years in prison for the embezzlement charges, with the other charges running concurrent. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the HOA for the embezzled funds, and to pay me an additional $10,000 in restitution for the property damage. Marcus finally closed out my case in December, almost a year after that February morning when I woke to construction equipment in my yard. The HOA had paid all attorney fees, totaling $18,000. With the judgments, restitution, and attorney fees, the HOA had paid out over $60,000 total. The new HOA board was professional and respectful. George Hoffman stopped by my house in late December with a holiday card and another apology. The community has learned a valuable lesson from all this, he said. We've revised our governing documents, implemented checks and balances, and made sure board members understand they can't just do whatever they want. I'm sorry you had to be the one to teach us that lesson. I'm just glad it's over, I replied honestly. On a cold morning in early January, almost a year to the day after the nightmare began, I stood in my backyard drinking coffee. The restored landscaping had settled in beautifully. The garden beds were mulched and ready for spring planting. The fire pit area had become my favorite spot on cool evenings. The privacy shrubs were establishing well. You couldn't even tell there had ever been a heated parking pad there. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the HOA, their monthly newsletter. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me open it. The newsletter included a section on lessons learned discussing the importance of property rights, proper procedures, and board accountability. There was a brief mention of the parking pad incident, carefully worded to avoid admitting more liability than necessary, but acknowledging mistakes were made. I finished my coffee and went back inside. The whole ordeal had been exhausting, expensive in terms of time and stress, and completely unnecessary. But it had also been vindicating. I'd stood up for my rights, followed proper legal procedures, and ultimately won completely. The HOA had learned that homeowners have rights that can't be bulldozed over, literally or figuratively. Karen had learned that abusing authority has consequences. And I'd learned that sometimes you have to fight, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult, because giving in to bullies only encourages them. My property was mine again, restored and improved. The HOA was under new, responsible leadership. Karen was in prison where she belonged. And I had established very clear boundaries, both literal and figurative, that nobody would cross again. On a Saturday afternoon in February, exactly 1 year after the construction crew first appeared, I hosted a small gathering in my backyard. My real estate lawyer Marcus came, along with Tom from Rocky Mountain Landscaping, and a few neighbors who had supported me through the ordeal. We sat around the fire pit, the same fire pit that had been destroyed and rebuilt, drinking beer and talking about anything except HOA drama. Tom was telling a story about another client and Marcus was laughing, and my neighbor Dave from 2 houses down was grilling burgers. It was a perfect moment. My property, my space, my rights, all intact and respected. George Hoffman walked by on the sidewalk and waved. I waved back. No hard feelings, no ongoing drama, just neighbors coexisting peacefully under clear rules that everyone understood and followed. That's all I'd wanted from the beginning. It shouldn't have taken a year, 2 lawsuits and criminal charges to get there. But sometimes that's what it takes to remind organizations that they serve homeowners, not rule them. As the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains and the fire pit flames danced against the cold evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt in a year, completely relaxed in my own backyard. The heated parking pad was gone. The HOA had been held accountable. Justice had been served, both civil and criminal. And I could finally just enjoy my home, my property, my space, without looking over my shoulder waiting for the next violation notice or construction crew. It was over. Really, truly over. And that felt better than any legal victory or restitution check ever could. The neighborhood returned to normal over the following months. Spring arrived and I planted vegetables in my restored garden beds, something I'd planned to do the year before but couldn't because of a certain concrete parking pad. The tomatoes and peppers thrived in Colorado's intense summer sun. The HOA continued operating smoothly under George's leadership. They consulted property surveys before any project. They notified homeowners in advance of any work near their properties. They followed their own rules and treated homeowners with respect. It was almost boring, which was exactly what an HOA should be. I never saw Karen again. According to the local news, she was serving her sentence at a minimum security facility about 2 hours away. Deborah Paulson moved to another state after completing her probation. Patricia Chen's law practice took a hit from the publicity. though she eventually recovered by specializing in helping homeowners fight abusive HOAs, which was ironic but admirable. My own life returned to normal. I worked my job as a software engineer, enjoyed my restored backyard, and generally forgot that the HOA even existed most of the time, which is exactly how it should be. Sometimes neighbors who were new to the development would hear the story and ask me about it. I'd give them the abbreviated version, always ending with the same advice. Document everything, know your rights, and don't let anyone bully you into giving up your property. The story became something of a legend in Highland Meadows. The time the HOA president went to prison for building on someone's land. It served as a cautionary tale for future board members and a reminder that homeowners had rights that must be respected. In the end, that was the real victory. Not the money, not the restored yard, not even seeing Karen face consequences for her actions. The real victory was that it couldn't happen again, not here, not to anyone else. The system had been broken, I'd stood up to it, and it had been fixed. That was worth every moment of stress, every hour spent with lawyers, every day of construction in my yard. Because my fight hadn't just been for me. It had been for every homeowner in Highland Meadows who might have faced Karen's abuse of power in the future. They were safe now. The system had checks and balances. The board followed proper procedures. Property rights were respected. And on warm summer evenings, I sat by my fire pit, looked at my thriving garden, and appreciated the simple pleasure of being left alone to enjoy my own property in peace. That's what home ownership should be. That's what I'd fought for, and that's what I'd won.